Okay, so visual people, famous visual people and famous things that have said on a visual basis. For example, Einstein, when he developed the theory of relativity, he talked about visualizing writing on a beam of light. So it's a real powerful visual term. Okay, around 35% is estimated of the population have got a visual preference. We can understand that through language patterns with the accent cues, but also we've got an assessment that we're going to give out that you can use too, which is quite generic, but you can adapt it to your own environment to find out. Auditory people, famous auditory people, musicians, famous musicians have been very auditory preference. Kinesthetic, famous sports people have been very kinesthetic. Chris Evert Lloyd's, certain golfers, certain footballers. And I know in my experience, I always use an assessment, and I'll always give one out at the start of the season or before I go into work with a team to find out what they are. And I would say 99 times out of 100, the majority of the people performing in that sport have got a very strong kinesthetic preference, and that'll sort of give me an idea of what I'm going to do moving forward. A perfect example was last year. I was asked to go and do some work with the World Cup team in lacrosse, and I emailed the coach these questionnaires to find out what their learning style was. And the relevance of doing that, well, I thought, well, I can go in there and talk about getting motivated through psychology and NLP and all the like, but it might just go over their head. Let me get an indication of where they are. And that sort of formed the basis of the structure of my sessions going forward. So the first session, I felt, well, I'll introduce them to what we're doing, but spend very limited time in the classroom. And I'm going to take them out in an environment where they're happier being in, and I'm going to fabricate an exercise and activity where they're moving. And in that movement, they're going to sort of buy into what we've got to offer and take more things on board. And it was very useful, because at the end of it, it was a lot of positive feedback, and they went on to do relatively well. Even though it wasn't a sport that I master personally, yet to deliver these transferable skills, all we need to know is what we're specialising in.
So it's a coaching thing.
Well, it helped. Yeah. It helped, in terms of how I would structure sessions going forward. Yeah. Had I had the group of 30, 40 and did things conventionally, like conventionally taught to do things through mainstream, I could have lost them, I felt. But the feedback I got back was they were very kinesthetic, so I thought, let's just get them out in an environment they're happier to do things, so they're moving and doing things. And that worked really. And that works. So there are ways and means we can do that. So it might be you're delivering a presentation to a group of people, and you think, well, what's the best way of delivering this presentation? Okay, this group that I'm going to be working with. Sometimes, if you haven't got the luxury of giving out an assessment, you might work on the balance of probability and think, okay, if I'm going to deliver a presentation to a group of people who are accountants, it might be that they have an auditory preference. If I'm going to give a presentation to a group of people who are web designers, they might have a visual preference. So I'll do things visually. If I'm going to go in and deliver a presentation to a group of sports people, likely they're going to be kinesthetic. So I might work on the balance of probability if I don't have the luxury of obviously giving out a questionnaire. But the sort of words that people will come up with in the various categories, visual people will use things like hazy, obscure, dim, cloudy, picture. Auditory people hear, listen, talk, tickle, groan, okay. Kinesthetic people feel, warm, I'm warming up to that idea, touch, soft, firm, needs a firm hand, iron fists, sort of things that people come up with. We're going back to what we said before with metaphors. Aroma, olfactory, aroma, scent, whiff, gustatory, flavour, palatable, sour, sweet, that's sweet. They'll use those. And you've got some people who are non-sensory. I find that people who are non-sensory tend to be people who, well, in my experience, I'm talking subjectively here, not factually in terms of any scientific evidence to go with it, but in my experience I tend to find people who, professors, senior lecturers tend to have a non-sensory based way of communicating. And a lot of them just say, well, think, how, understand. There's like a neutrality in terms of how they come across. Okay. they're the sort of areas and sort of things that people use. Can anyone relate to them words in terms of?
Yeah.
Okay, can anyone relate to them?
Is there a handout for this?
There is indeed, yes. So you can relate to certain people who have. Okay. So does anyone use any of those words in conversation? Any?
All of them actually.